This episode of the Media Leader podcast was edited by our production partner, Trisonic. And if you're looking for podcast production support, we highly recommend them. Find them at trisonic.co.uk.
You know, it's very topical that this was the year of the analog and people have got all this digital fatigue. But actually, when we kind of sat down and really dissected it, we realised that it's not that. It's just that people want to flip between the two. And IRL experiences are something that people really want now, and they want to go out and experience things with their friends. But they also need digital platforms to discover them and share them.
Welcome to the Media Leader podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. Within the publishing market, one segment that has had a really up and down few years has been free sheets. As the pandemic disrupted commuting, trains and tubes added Wi-Fi, and hybrid working became the norm, the number of people reading the paper on their daily commute dropped. This has had downstream effects on some of the UK's oldest papers. The Evening Standard became the Standard, moving from a daily to a weekly paper and emphasizing its website. Metro, which remains the UK's highest circulation paper by a long shot, has seen several restructures and moved in and out of profitability as it has also sought to invest in its digital and social products. Now, facing declining click-through rates to websites because of Google's changes to search, these news outlets are having to adapt again. Indeed, as free sheets, they're entirely reliant on advertising as a business model, putting them at the coalface of changes in reader behavior, both offline and on. Joe Mazenko is commercial director of Metro. Deborah Arthurs is the editor-in-chief of Metro. Last month, I joined them at Mail Metro Media's offices in Kensington to discuss how the title has had to adapt to the changing publishing market. This is our conversation. I hope you enjoy. Deborah Arthurs and Joe Mazenko, thanks so much for having me here, and welcome to my show, but we are recording it at your offices, so thanks so much for the studio space.
Thank you for having us.
So I like to start the podcast asking how you both got into media, and it's great to have both someone from the commercial end and the editorial end of the business. I don't often get to ask journalists how they got started in the business themselves. So Deborah, why don't you kick us off, and then Joe, it'd be cool to hear how your career paths have taken you to Metro.
So I didn't set out with a grand plan for my career, but I knew that I loved journalism. I consumed a lot of it. My parents got newspapers every day. My mum got the Daily Mail. My dad had the Telegraph. And every morning before school, I'd read those. On the weekends, we'd read the supplements. And I just loved the stories, seeing the world through the eyes of the humans at the heart of those stories. That always spoke to me. My grandmother worked in a doctor's surgery, and she used to bring home stacks of magazines. Post-COVID, we would never touch those, would we? But then I lapped them up. We had Marie Claire and Vogue and all these magazines that I would never have seen otherwise. And Marie Claire used to have this deep investigation each month. There was like a 6-page report on something that was really significant in the world. It was like female circumcision or the treatment of tribes in the Amazon. And it was really important stuff that you wouldn't really see in women's magazines these days. And that really, I was so interested in that. And I knew I wanted to, I would have loved to be involved in telling those stories, but I didn't know how. My school wasn't the kind of school that led you to that sort of career. And I didn't know how people became journalists back then. And it wasn't until later, when I'd entered the work world, I'd actually studied Hispanic studies and Latin American studies. I wanted to go to Mexico. I wanted to learn Spanish. That was my passion. But when I was in the world of work, a friend of mine was working here at the Daily Mail. And it was an entry-level job. It was editorial assistant. And she was moving on to the travel desk, which was the job that everyone wanted because you get to travel the world on a dime, don't you? She was moving on, and this role became available. And back then, because it was such a low-skilled role, you don't want someone that's, studied journalism to the highest degree and wants to come in and instantly become a reporter. You want someone with the right attitude and curiosity and things you can't teach. And I think that's what landed me that job. And then I worked my way through the business. From there on, I started writing, researching, writing captions for the reporters. I'd go down to the library and I'd get the paper cuts when they were investigating big features. We didn't really have the internet back then. That makes me sound really old. Mm-hmm. We did have the internet, but it wasn't what it is today. So if you wanted to research someone or something that had happened, you had to physically walk down to the library, get out the paper cuts, and there'd be these envelopes full of every article that had ever been written about that person from all the different papers across the country. And that's what I did, and that's how I learnt the trade. And I listened to the way that reporters did their jobs. I watched the Editors' Commission. I listened to people doing interviews over the phone. You know, I'm really a big supporter of being in the office environment and hearing and seeing experts do their jobs. And that's how I moved up. And then I worked, we launched the London Light newspaper, and I worked on that launch. We went into digital with Mail Online. I worked on that launch. And then I took over Metro. And it's been a real career of change, you know, print, digital, social, audience development, technological changes. It's been a real journey, and every day's been exciting. And it really does feel like a happy accident in some ways.
Been here your whole career, which is...
I've been in this group my whole career. Yeah, it's very remarkable. But the way I see it is that I've worked at many different titles within this group, and every role has felt completely different. And even when I've been in those roles, it's changed dramatically. You know, Metro is not the same now as it was 10 years ago. And so every day I'm learning. There's never been a dull day, I can confidently say that.
Jo, has it been the same for you? How did you come to Metro and get into media in the first place?
So I don't think my story is quite as interesting as Deborah's, but I actually studied graphic design at university. I loved the creativity of it, but I soon realised that the technical side of things wasn't really going to be my strong point. So that was obviously a bit of a problem with, video and what have you. So I think I stumbled across media like most of us do. It's not sort of something we sort of, seek. I started my career at Clear Channel. I was there for a couple of years, which I loved. Such a great team down there. And then I got the opportunity to come and work at Metro. So I've been here for 20 years. And like Deborah said, it's been so exciting because Metro's a brand that really challenges everything. You know, we've always pushed the way forward in creativity and innovation. And that could be in print. You know, we've done scented cover apps and pop-up cover apps. More recently in digital, in social, we've done events. We've had flash mobs singing at London Bridge Station. So everything's felt really exciting and continuously evolving. So yeah, really, really exciting place to work.
Lots of change recently. I feel like it's been an up and down past couple of years. I mean, the pandemic obviously had a significant impact on the publishing business, the print business. I know there was a restructure in 2023. There, after changes to sort of transit habits that people had. I'm sure that was painful, but then the paper became profitable again in 2024. And then last year, as with many publishers, traffic has sort of reportedly declined across the board, and there's been a pivot to embrace social video and different strategies to try and make up for that. I'm aware more cuts occurred last year as well. So can you talk me through that journey of where you were before the pandemic to where you are now and all the different sort of humps and valleys along the way?
We don't like to talk about the pandemic because from a print point of view, it was devastating. We rode a wave of success at Metro for, 25 years, and it did literally come crashing down overnight when we all went into lockdown. It was really incredibly sad. But I think we've done a really good job to kind of build the momentum back up since the pandemic. We've had to kind of re-engage with every single one of our advertisers to prove, the power of the commute and that people are commuting. We work very closely with TfL. We rely on their data. We've actually changed our distribution to make sure that it's agile and optimized. So we've taken some copies out of like the inner cities, and we're more prevalent in, the commuter towns where people will get on a train and they've got half an hour to sit and plan their day ahead. And, we're writing content that really helps people that are going into these cities, the cultural engines to get the most out of, everyday life. So whether they're meeting friends, working, socialising, going to new restaurants, planning holidays, we're there for them. And I think what's really important is that we're not dependent on one platform anymore. The commute always will be important to Metro while we have a newspaper. And, those commuters are incredibly valuable to advertisers. But, we now have, our website, and we publish on Apple News, which does incredibly well for us. And our social platforms are doing really, really well. So I think what's key is that we're there where people want to consume us. And that could be on TikTok, it could be in the newspaper, it could be on one of our podcasts. So we've really diversified. And that does keep things really exciting.
How does the change of distribution strategy then affect from an editorial lens? I mean, you're talking about, making sure people do want to pick up a print newspaper on their commute. Maybe their commute's from further out than it used to be because of people moving around a little bit. But then also, of course, people do go on their phones on transport. How do you make sure that Metro is still part of that sort of daily habit?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Andy Guyton. He's our distribution lead, and he is not single-handed, he's got a team with him, but he really is responsible for making sure that every copy's in the right place, and it's meticulous. If you see a bin that has maybe a few extras in on any given day, he'll make sure that the next day there's the correct number of papers in that bin, and if there's one that's emptied earlier, he'll make sure that one has more. I mean, it's really fine-tuned, it's brilliant. When it comes to meeting people where they are, as Joe said, we're very aware that we have 1 million people picking up the paper, but there's a whole host of other people that want to find Metro in a different way. The website is obviously incredibly valuable. We're an all-day companion to people. So our traffic, we have spikes. Early morning, we have a spike. Lunchtime, another one. And then the evening is when it slowly builds. So our biggest volume of audience is actually in the evenings. Social, MSN and Apple are two of our most popular third-party platforms. We have hundreds of millions of page views on those every month. So what Metro's done, I think, is successfully understand that you can't change people's habits dramatically enough to mean that everybody comes to visit Metro at the homepage. We're realistic enough to understand that that's not how people operate these days. I'd love them to wake up and say, I'm going to Metro to see what's happening in the news, but more likely they'll go to Apple News, or they'll see a notification from Apple News, or they'll go onto TikTok or YouTube or Facebook, and we need to make sure that that's where we are. So we just need to make sure that our content is packaged successfully to land and to be distributed widely on those platforms. It hits in terms of the timing that it's posted, the type of content, and then the engagement it gets, which obviously helps it. It's travel.
How do you make sure you monetize that across all of it? Because I know a lot of publishers have embraced sort of social platforms because there are audiences there, of course, and that's maybe a way to get them back onto the site. Equally, you don't have full control over that audience, and not only whether or not they click to the site, but also whether or not the algorithm shows them Metro material in the first place. So especially when you talk about embracing more of a social strategy, or doing video, doing multimedia content, how do you just make sure that you're doing that sustainably from a business perspective?
Well, when it comes to our third parties, like MSN, for instance, we do a deal with MSN, so we're not paid by reader that returns to our site, although some do. We have a partnership deal where we're paid for views on their site, which actually works really well for us. Apple is the same. And with Facebook, as you know, because you talked about this a lot over your podcast, I know Facebook deprioritized news a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. We found that Facebook, you used to be able to put an article on Facebook and you could get millions of page views on it easily. It was like printing money back in the day, wasn't it? You published it and they would come. Now, that isn't so much the case. Facebook focuses more on groups and pages, and news is not as prominent as it once was. But we now find that a successful way of monetizing on Facebook is to post video, because Facebook still likes to distribute video widely into people's feeds. And so we've been experimenting a lot over the last few years on the kind of video that distributes most widely, that our readers want to see, and not only distributes to the people that follow us, because what's most important is that it's just distributed outside of that set. So the further it travels, the better, really. So we just need to make sure that our video that we're posting on Facebook is absolutely right for that audience. And that's been a huge part of our work this year.
Yeah, and I think from a commercial point of view, we've got a brilliant partnerships team, and we ask our clients to use us consultatively. So we've got all these different platforms. We've got brilliant editorial, but consider the platform in which your content is being distributed on, because we've got experts internally that know that audience inside out and back to front. They know their mindset. They might know where and when that content's being distributed. So think of us as consultants in that respect, because we know our users better than anybody else, and we are creating these brilliant 360 campaigns that live across print, digital, social, experiential, and we've done some really great experiential campaigns recently. But each one has to lend itself to the platform in which it's intended to be consumed.
We've always had a real open door policy at Metro. I think there's been a lot of conversation across brands in the last few years about editorial and commercial working closer together. Metro has been like that from day one.
Yeah.
We're a paper that doesn't have a cover price. Commercial has always been really important to us, and we know that the best relationships with clients come from a really solid relationship with editorial and a collaborative relationship. And I've worked with Joe for many, many years, and that does help. We've got great relationships, and we take that out to the clients and the brands, and it really has paid dividends.
Yeah, and brands can come in and see us. The door's always open. We love hosting immersion sessions. We give brands access to editorial. We've got loads of data and insight. We've got great creative teams internally. So we love it when brands lean on us in that respect.
You're right in that more and more publishers are bringing those teams together. Of course, the church and state issue is obvious. It comes up. How do you make sure that you're managing to keep church and state while also bringing commercial and editorial?
Well, I think that goes without saying. You're right. It's a conversation that I've had since I started out in journalism. I think back then it was much clearer, the line. Now the conversations happen, but we're always very clear with clients and brands that the editorial is pure, and that we can have conversations around what they'll appear around, but they will never influence what's actually written. Yeah. We would never change what we're writing about a brand or a news story because of a commercial relationship. But the conversations are had to make sure that brands feel safe advertising in a news environment. We've talked before as well about how most of the eyeballs are on news, and the front half of the paper is where most people spend their time. So what we want to do is encourage brands to trust us, because actually I personally think that readers don't make those negative associations that I think brands fear that they do.
There's been plenty of marketing research on this topic that proves that point.
Right.
Yeah.
I think readers are very smart, and they can make the distinction between a bad news story and a brand selling something. And I don't think it taints the image of that brand. But I understand that brands do feel very conscious of that, and we work very hard to make sure that they appear in a safe environment.
Yeah, and you have to think about who is engaging with Metro. So from a paper point of view, we're talking to people that are getting up in the morning and going to their place of work. So they're not sat at the breakfast table having a leisurely breakfast. They're getting up, and they could be going to a building site or a classroom or a shop or a dentist or an office. So, we've got a very diverse and varied readership. So we are constantly creating content that is helpful and useful to people. So as Deborah said, the first half of the paper is news. And then we have loads of brilliant features that sit across money and travel and health and fitness and entertainment. And we let brands set the agenda in terms of features. So, if a brand comes to us and wants to do an Easter food special, then we will work very closely with the editorial team to keep that integrity intact, but to make sure that the content that we're writing is useful for the people who are consuming it.
Gotcha. There's been a lot of news within the publishing industry about keyword block listing. So it's one thing to have it on the print on paper, and it's you can physically see the different sections, and something that I miss as a journalist that I don't read enough print. On the web, obviously, it's different. There's keyword block listing practices that can wrongly demonetize legitimate journalism. Joe, especially, how do you make sure that as little of that happens? Because as you've talked about, there is a level of responsibility that you all feel to make sure that you're not going to show up next to something that's not suitable for your brand in the first place, it sounds like. So what are those conversations?
I mean, we are all over brand safety. It's something that it's really important to us. So we have lots of measurement in place. We will work very closely with editorial. So every day we have access to the news list, so we know what's going to be running. If we've got, on the flat plan, if we've got an advertiser that is running on a page that might have a story about war or something, we will make sure we get more information about exactly what's being reported on, because we know that there are sensitivities, exactly, and we do everything that we can to protect advertisers against that, because it just doesn't sit well and it doesn't read well, and our relationships with our advertising partners are really, really important.
Do you think advertisers should be using keyword block lists, generally speaking?
Well, online, they are.
Yeah.
There are these lists, but we did some analysis last year. We looked at the articles that were being blocked by these words, and you were finding perfectly safe articles that were being flagged because they might have had the word, say, sex, but you were talking about gender, or it might have had the word black or white, but it wasn't talking about race, it was talking about something completely different. But that's a very simple example, but stories were being flagged that shouldn't have been. So we did a lot of work last year to make sure that the filter was more finessed and that we weren't blocking stories that could have otherwise had advertising.
So a human element as well as relying on tech.
Human element.
And advertisers, I imagine, also need to have a human element to make sure that they're not, because they would probably want to be against some of those stories,
Exactly.
I would think.
Exactly.
Especially if they're already spending with you anyway, and they're just not, because without even maybe realizing it.
And especially if they're, performing well, these articles are high traffic. They want to be amongst news stories that people are generally interested in reading about. So it is tricky.
We want as many page views as possible to be monetized. Obviously, that's one of the goals.
That's part of the game.
Part of the game, exactly.
On that note, there's been so much talk within the publishing industry about Google changing things. It's affected, it seems like, basically every publisher across the business. I'm curious, AI search, how that has affected Metro's business at all, if at all, and what steps you might be taking to get through whatever this phase of transition is with what's going on with referral traffic from search.
I think you're right to call it a phase because, as you know, 20 years ago we were worried about search, and then we were worried about social, and then everything was mobile. So we've always been an industry of change and that can adapt well to change. But this last few years has been so dramatic, hasn't it? I don't think I've seen change happen as fast as I have in the last few years. So Google used to bring us, a really good deal of our traffic, as did Facebook. Practically overnight, that changed. Not only because, as we mentioned earlier, Facebook deprioritized news, as did Google. Google deprioritized big titles in favor of niche publications, topic-based publications. So a lot of the content that we were doing very well for many years suddenly wasn't performing as well anyway. So that was already a challenge. And what we did was adapt the way we created our content to lean into those specialist areas, and that has paid dividends. But with the Google Zero that you're talking about, I was looking at some numbers recently on a graphic, and it said Google has around 600 million searches an hour, and about 1/3 of those gets a click. The other 2/3 don't. People go on to do something else. And about 2/3 of that 1/3 go through to the open web. So you can see it's diminishing returns, but it's still a good deal of page views, right? So we haven't entirely lost our search. Discover's still pretty strong. What we've had to do is continue to diversify. So Discover has actually come back for us. And I think that's because we are leaning into more specialist areas. So we've honed the selection of content we're doing. We're not trying to write everything for all people anymore. We've reduced the number of stories that we're doing, and we're making them better quality, longer, more detailed. And we found that in writing fewer stories, we actually got more average page views per story. So they're doing better. Google recognizes detail and originality and length somewhat. And we found that by adapting our strategy, not necessarily for Google, but because the reader welcomes that as well, that it has given us a boost in that area.
You're sort of saying it's incentivized quality over quantity.
Yeah.
SEO perhaps becomes I don't know, it's still important, but maybe a little less important. And if you just create quality work that you think that will get cited by either AI search and or people will just come back to the brand because they think, wow, Metro's coming out with some really great stuff. Maybe I'll go direct. Is that part of the strategy?
That's absolutely it. And it's not just about coming direct, because as we just discussed earlier, that is a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's about searching out Metro intentionally. So they might search Metro soaps, which is one of our most popular, or they might search Metro Arsenal because they know that we're really strong on Arsenal news, or money. You know, we're really focusing on our money content because we know that's what we researched it with our audience, and we talked to commercial as well, and we came up with these series of content pillars that we know resonate with our audiences. So we decided to then invest in those areas, and yeah, we want people to come to Metro, to remember what they've read when they come, because as you know, that's another challenge, is having people just remember where they found something. Sure. And then to come back. And yeah, it's working.
And commerce is an interesting one as well, isn't it, for us? I think, Metro's always been a discovery brand. We help people decide what to eat, what to buy, what to book, where to go. And what we're trying to do is shorten the distance between inspiration and action. So again, getting people to use Metro as that discovery brand.
Is there a plan for engaging with AI companies, or is that is that a wider part of the business?
In respect to advertising, we actually carried a cover up for OpenAI a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, did you? I missed that.
It was really interesting. And do you know what? The creative was brilliant. So it was all around the football, so tapping into, one of the biggest cultural moments, which is what we do really well. We can be reactive. And it was using football-related searches that Metro readers might use, so about sweepstakes and hosting parties. And it was just really interesting that, one of the world's biggest, most innovative tech brands was using Metro as that mass reach medium.
In the print product.
Yeah. In the print product, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we love that.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I want to talk about the print product as well, because, I don't think it's worth selling it short. It's the highest circulation print product by a great margin, and in second place is the Daily Mail, which is also part of the group. Partially it's because it's a free sheet, which obviously does mean that you're relying on advertising. How do you sell in the print product versus all the other products to sort of say, this is right for you, OpenAI, or whomever else you're speaking with, as opposed to the website or all together?
I think it's a couple of things, actually. I think audience is going to be really key. Our commuter audience is really valuable. As we said before, they're people that are getting up in the morning and going to their place of work. So they've got loads of decisions to make. But they're also, we're actually commissioning a piece of research at the moment, which is in field, looking at what the commute looks like in 2026. Because for a lot of people, they have to go to their place of work every single day. We work in media advertising. We have the luxury of being able to work from home if we choose to. I mean, we personally love to be in the office. But people they can work flexibly. But, the vast majority of people have to get up and go to their place of work every day. So that's an incredibly valuable audience, because they're using that half an hour that they have sitting on the train to think about what they're going to have for dinner tonight and what bills they need to pay and what they need
where they want to go on holiday.
Exactly. But actually, what's interesting is people that are commuting less frequently have a better relationship with the commute. So on days when they're coming into, cities and towns, they're probably going to make the most of it because they're paying for that commute. So, they'll meet friends after work, they'll be going to the gym, but ultimately spending money, which is what advertisers are after. They don't want people that sat at home. They want people that are out and about, being spontaneous and socially active. So I think that's one part. I think the other is premiumization, which we do really well. As we said with the OpenAI cover app, we love cover apps. They were the original mobile media. We say they're like posters on the move. And there's great synergy with how out of home is consumed and where it's consumed, and also who's picking it up. But, they're so impactful, cover apps. We do hundreds of RAM studies every single year. In fact, we do one every week. So we can prove the value of the investment for a cover app. I think the average purchase intent benchmark is 22% for RAM across print, but cover apps, we see them exceeding this all the time. And we're always coming up with new premium formats, and that's not just in print, that's in digital and social. And we really kind of encourage brands to lean into that, because you can stick an avocado in the O of Metro, or you can change the masthead. I mean, we had McDonald's for their secret menu take the masthead off completely. We've done all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and it just gets that additional brand recall. So, yeah, I think we do that really well.
In terms of the London market in particular, there's been changes to who you're competing with as well over the past couple of years. Don't need to get into the fall of the Evening Standard, but it's not around on a daily basis anymore. So you actually have less competition, at least certainly in the local space here in London, and then elsewhere, I imagine, as well. So has that affected anything? I mean, in some ways, when I say you're still the biggest paper in the country by circulation, it's not even close compared to other papers anymore. So, not to say has it been a benefit, but has it been a benefit, or are you still sort of? I
don't think it has been a benefit, actually. I mean, nobody wants to see anyone else fail,
right.
And that's not what we're about at all. So, if anything, I think we've had to pedal even harder to prove the value of free sheets and the commuter audience, which we work incredibly hard to do. I think cities are increasingly important. They're these engines of culture where trends are born and amplified and accelerated, and brands need to be part of that conversation to stay relevant. We actually launched a new campaign 2 weeks ago called IRL times URL. And the premise behind it is that people no longer separate the digital world from the physical world, but they move seamlessly through the two. So searching for things, discovering things, and then you could read about a restaurant review in Metro in the morning, and then you search it on your phone, and then you share it with your friends, and then you're actually there in the evening because you're in the city and you can go and see it. So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that more? I mean, you're also talking about maybe getting to the live events space as well. I know a lot of publishers have turned to that as a potential new revenue stream. Why is the URL x IRL important to the future of the business?
We need a new story to take to market. So we started to think at the beginning of the year about how, it's very topical that this was the year of the analog and people have got all this digital fatigue. But actually, when we kind of sat down and really dissected it, we realised that it's not that. It's just that people want to flip between the two. And IRL experiences are something that people really want now, and they want to go out and experience things with their friends, but they also need digital platforms to discover them and share them. So it's not one or the other, it's both of them and how powerful they are together. So we had a brilliant event at the Art Academy a couple of weeks ago where we invited kind of the planning and investment community to come down. We had a couple of panels. So we had a scientist talking about kind of the power of printed and digital medium coming together and the multiplier effect that you see from that. Deborah and I were on a panel with a culture expert called Remel London. We were talking about how culture moves really fast in cities and how brands really need to be part of that conversation. And then we had Rob Buckhaven, who is our drinks editor, and Courtney, who's one of our lifestyle editors, and they did like a drinks tasting. It was functional drinks, so it was in the morning. So
non-alcoholic.
No alcohol. But it was really fun. And we were also talking about, we've got a really exciting collaboration that we're looking to launch with Time Out. So obviously Time Out used to print, now they're online only, because commercially it's so expensive to distribute a printed format, especially every day, but even every week. So we're looking to partner with them to use their voice of credibility and our scale. So on a Friday, we'll be looking to launch this new section called something like The Essential List or The City Edit, where we bring our readers the best of things to do in and around London to start with, but then with national social extensions. So we'd love to work with the brand on that. So we're always looking at ways that we can work with other brands and bring more value to our readers.
And for the readers, it's about building communities. We've talked about people looking for content that taps into their interests, and that's what we're looking to do as well. And people don't just necessarily want to consume that, they want to belong to something. And I think that's what we're delivering with the IRL by URL.
What do you need to do right to remain a daily and provide this sort of daily sense of community as opposed to some of the other papers that have maybe moved to a weekly format?
I feel like it's habit forming, isn't it? Like one of Metro's great virtues is that it's there every day and that it creates this habit. It's not only a mental habit, it's a physical habit. You walk to the station, you pick up your copy and you get on the train. We want obviously to create that same sort of habit for online, but with print, it's there. It's physical and it's hardwired into people. I think that's a real benefit. With the social and digital aspect, we are almost borrowing from that technique. So with social, we're launching formats on our TikTok and Instagram platforms that are informed by the most loved formats from print and from digital. So Rush Hour Crush and What I Rent, Good Deed Feed, they've all been transformed into social first formats. And going back to the point about what creates that daily habit, it's creating those formats more regularly. So we're not just posting once a week, we're posting daily and sometimes multiple times a day so that people really get to recognise that format and the creator that leads it. And you're creating this recognisable format that you want people to revisit and come back to again and again.
We've had, for going back to Rush Hour Crush, we've had people meet on the tube, get married, have babies. We had someone that moved to Australia a couple of years ago and they wrote to us and said that he was going to propose to her. They met through Rush Hour Crush, so they put the proposal in Rush Hour Crush.
Very cute.
We've had people meet on train stations, and this was a great one that happened last year actually. Someone saw a guy on the train station every day at Clapham, and she put a Rush Hour Crush in the paper saying, "You're the guy in the green hat and in the headphones, drink." And she got the paper and she approached him on the station and she gave it to him and she said, "Turn to page 11." And he turned to page 11 and he kind of looked confused and walked off. He had no idea that she'd posted it. She thought this has failed entirely. So then the penny dropped and he put a message in and asked her out, and then they ended up moving in together, and we did a big feature interviewing them both last year.
This is like the Pina Colada song.
Yes, exactly.
It still happens, and it's still, and would you say it requires print?
Isn't that great? Yeah. Do you know what? I think it does, and I love that real analog format that it comes in. There's no pictures, there's no video. It's really it's kind of innocent. When I tried some years ago with the social team to translate that into social video, we had some ideas and we were thinking, what if we could get people to take a photo of someone on the commute and send that in? And then we thought, no, you can't do that. That's creepy.
Yeah.
And actually the younger ones...
We're not a creepy band.
No,
we're not creepy. We wanted this to remain quite innocent. And actually it's taken quite a lot of iterations to find a format that does work for social. And they've changed the format quite a lot. So now they've auditioned a creator, and she has a board and she interviews a guy that she stops on the street. So we wanted to keep that commuter feel. So you're still out and about, you're meeting people. The Rush Hour Crush is still true. So she finds a guy or a girl and asks them what they're looking for. And then she goes around the local area and she tries to find someone who might want to connect. So it's trying to bring that original Rush Hour Crush to life for a social audience.
Yeah.
It's very early days.
And I think what that does is it opens up the opportunity to increase our brand count. So that is fundamentally our biggest commercial challenge, is increasing brand count, something that we're really working around the clock to do. Metro was born around the commute, but your day doesn't stop when you get off the train. So it's about finding new ways to connect to people that are, we're a fun brand. We like having fun, and
we're much loved.
Yeah, we don't take ourselves too seriously. So it's, keeping the conversation going throughout the day.
As you mentioned the commuting research that you're working on, has the time of when people do the commuting changed at all? Do people go earlier?
Yet,
okay,
we will.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, we'll be
how people are changing their behaviour.
Yeah, we'll be sharing it far and wide when it comes back, but it will be really interesting.
But anecdotally, we all know that our travel times have changed, haven't they? Just a small sample group, we all got into work differently this morning. When we looked at TfL data to see what footfall looks like, footfall has is almost back to where it was pre-pandemic. But people are travelling at slightly different times. They might be going to a WeWork, they might be going to the gym, they might be working from home, but then going out in the afternoon. So they're still finding Metro, they're still picking it up. They're out and about, they're just not necessarily, like you say, doing the 9 to 5 anymore. And that's one of the, I'd say, positives that's come out of the pandemic in a way, is that we're not now tied to those very rigid start and finish times. People can get more flexibility.
Actually, and that's a really, really interesting point, because you probably see less people reading Metro on the tube now than you did pre-pandemic. And the reason why that is because Andy, who Deborah mentioned, and his team, I mean, they are forensic when it comes to distribution, and we have to keep our returns lower than 3%. We run a very tight P&L these days, that's really, really important. So we are distributing at more of the commuter stations where people have got the time to sit and read. So if you go on the train, you'll see a lot more people reading Metro. We're 47% of our distributions on buses now, and actually we only distribute 170,000 copies of the 1 million on the London Underground,
right.
And that's the whole of the London Underground. So that's why you probably see less people reading them, but it doesn't mean people aren't reading them.
No. From the volume of letters we get, we know that they're still reading.
Yeah.
I'll need to talk to Andy, because oftentimes I'll be maybe coming home later than normal, and of course there's no more papers left. They've all been taken.
That's good.
Which is
But you
good,
know what,
but it's
Jack?
also like, oh, well, I would have, just speaking for myself only, I might have picked it up at that time. So there is something to like the change of consumer behavior and commuter behavior, and making sure that there are the exact right number throughout the day as the times then change. I mean, and he sounds like he has a very difficult job.
It is a challenge, because obviously we'd like to distribute more where they go quicker, but then we're restricted by that million.
Yeah.
There is an e-edition, Jack, which I can send you the link after this.
Sure.
Just Google Metro e-edition.
Okay.
And then you can see the exact replica of the paper on your phone.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we still get people saying, advertisers saying, "Oh, I don't really want to advertise on a Friday because no one commutes on a Friday."
Right.
And you just think, okay, sure. But
The truth is that more copies are picked up
On a
of
Friday.
Friday's edition than any other day of the week.
What explains that?
well, they stay in the bins over the distribution bins over
Right,
the weekend.
right.
So Andy and his team don't collect the Friday edition until Monday, and we get 0 returns on a Monday morning. So any advertisers that are wanting to capitalise on, the valuable weekday commuter. Let's think about this Friday, for example, a massive football game coming up. We all woke up. Well, I woke up to the news this morning. I didn't stay up all night and watch the game. But
England won 3-2.
We're speaking the day after England beat Mexico.
Yeah.
I say that
Yeah.
confidently, having definitely
At the
watched that.
Azteca Stadium, which was
Right.
one of the highest in the world, so it was a tough gig.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyone advertising on Friday's Metro, they will continue to be picked up. Slightly different audience, obviously, over the weekend, and it's not loads of copies, but
Surely it's a value proposition of saying, well, I mean, you'll be there for 3 days instead of 1 day, even though there might be technically fewer commuters.
Yeah, we did actually look at creating a weekend edition of Metro just after the pandemic, but we did loads of research, and we realised that when people are travelling at the weekend, they're very much eyes up, with friends and family, socialising, or with their kids. But in the week, it's very much eyes down, and that's
On
why
your own.
Metro's always been so successful, because before mobile phones, you'd be sat on the tube desperately trying to find something to do, to read. It's just a very different mindset and audience during the week and the weekend. But, I'd say both very valuable.
It's why our puzzle page became so cultish.
Oh, and our weekend
Popular.
puzzle edition.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I want to look ahead a little bit. You mentioned World Cup. I imagine that's providing a lift to almost every media owner here in the UK, especially the further England goes. And by the time this podcast goes out, we'll probably know how they ended up doing in the end. But it's been really positive so far. What needs to go well in H2 to sort of say thumbs up? We've had a good year. We're moving in a positive direction going into 2027.
I think brand count, as I said, really important, and we need to continue to engage with new advertisers to prove not only the value of Metro but the value of print and publishing. I think the premium inventory, again, really key for us. Continuing to work closely with editorial. We do some brilliant partnerships, creating content that brands can get involved with. We'd love to do more collaborations with, like the Time Out collaboration that I mentioned. We're always looking at new ways that we can drive revenue. So we have an out-of-home amplification that we offer to advertisers who are buying cover apps from us now. So we work with Deco. We've got a great relationship with them, and we can buy D6 impressions in proximity to the key commuter stations as some extra reach and frequency. And it's kind of like, a bit of a vanity piece, but, we're always looking at new things. So I think, new ideas, new revenue streams, increasing our brand count, increasing our premium inventory, and
some really good long-term high-value partnerships.
Yeah.
As an editorial head, what I love doing is working with partners on long-term projects or exciting advertising that actually amplifies both the content and the brand. And I think that's a real sweet spot for the reader as well as the brand. We've had a really good example from Burger King. We worked with them on a front page ad some years ago when Boris Johnson was having his grilling over the Partygate.
Yes, he was being grilled.
He was being grilled.
Yes, I do remember that, yeah.
So he was being grilled over Partygate, and our front page had the story on it, and we spoke to Burger King quite late in the day, and they had a fantastic ad that they wanted to run above the story, which was Burger King. They're
home of the proper Whoppers.
They're not proper Whoppers. Oh, our head. Sorry, you're right, Joe. Home of the proper Whopper. The reason I got that confused is because the day before we'd run a story about Boris Johnson saying we said they weren't proper Whoppers. He said he wasn't really lying. He was sort of lying. So the next day, the advert said Burger King, home of the proper Whopper.
Right.
And then our subtext said Boris gets a grilling. And it was this fantastic contextual advertising that it went viral. We woke up the next morning and
funny.
It had been held up on Sky on This Morning, on Good Morning Britain. It had thousands of tweets with people saying, was this an accident? Was it deliberate? And some of the tweets were saying things like Burger King marketing and the Metro editor should get the rest of the month off. This is genius. This will be taught in marketing. Did you take the rest of the month off? No, I didn't, sadly. We had to get back on it. But, it was one of those things that I really enjoyed doing. And that's the kind of thing that Metro does really well. We invite brands in, we have conversations with them, and then we gain each other's trust. And then they trust us to make waves in that way. And actually that led to us doing one of my favourite, most recent 360 campaigns, which, as I said, that's something we're really interested in doing more of. When they were launching the Wagyu beef burger, we did a spread in the paper which was about the British Wagyu beef industry. We did social video where we went actually to the farm where they rear the cattle, and it was a homepage takeover as well on digital. So really fantastic brand trust that led to quite a creative campaign that benefited us all. So that's what I'm excited to do more of this year.
What's your challenge to the rest of the publishing industry? Not necessarily just the people sitting in the offices here, but if you're speaking with other editors or other commercial leaders, we've talked about a number of challenges I think facing the wider publishing industry with regard to traffic or having to adapt to a new reality. What would you like to see the publishing industry do differently?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think we probably have to lean into our strengths. So trust, curation, physical presence, shared cultural moments, and the ability to create mass attention and work together, because we've obviously got these great 360 platforms, but we are up against the likes of Meta and Google. And, there's so much that we've got to bring to the party. And trust is so important.
That's it. Trust is our most valuable asset.
Yeah.
But working with other brands, so working to create legislation that protects the publishing industry. It's very difficult to, it's the David and Goliath, isn't it, with the big tech firms and the publishers. But we are much stronger if we work as one. And I know there's some really interesting working groups growing now around AI, around Google conversations, and I think that's where we need to be. As Joe said, we need to work together.
Spur, I think, is that's one here in the UK. Mm-hmm. There's a movement to have mass local lawsuits filed against AI companies for just taking copyright and not necessarily paying for that.
Right, and it's happening in other countries. You see that legislation being passed in other countries, and I think the UK is a little behind the curve when it comes to that sort of legislation. But I think there's definitely a movement building.
Gotcha. Okay, final question. Favorite way to commute?
Oh, mine's walking for sure. I am a keen walker. I like to walk here most days, listen to a podcast, clear my head, start the day with a bit of exercise. But I always pick up my Metro as soon as I get into the office and read it from front to back.
You could be listening to
obviously.
You could be listening to the Smart 7 on the way. I am a cyclist, so whether it's my own bike, if I'm feeling like I want to put some power behind me, or if I'm just wanting a relaxed commute, I will jump on a Lime bike.
Okay. All right. Well,
I always park
apparently
them
I'm the only one that
responsibly.
takes the tube still. Yeah. Within this group, I just take the tube. Of course, I hope you park them responsibly. You don't need those people breaking their legs or something like that.
So how do you get here?
I take the I walked here because I live nearby, but I take the tube normally. And like I said, I'm constantly sort of seeing how many papers are still being taken because obviously my job as a journalist as well. I'm always curious to see who's reading and how much. But
What's
anyway,
your favourite tube line?
my favorite tube line?
Yes, because I mean, some of
surely
them
the Lizzie line, but. The district line is what I take every day.
Oh, no. It's the worst one.
No,
it's air conditioned.
I like the district. It's spacious and air conditioned.
Yeah.
Central and northern.
Central line
hot.
is I mean, I wouldn't want to read any. I can't read anything. I'm too focused on the heat on the Central line.
And it's
I
too
need to work
full.
on it. It is too full. Yeah.
You can always read the Metro on the district. And
See, people are commuting. You heard it here first.
People still commute. Joe, Deborah, thank you so much.
Thank
It's been a real
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
so
Jack.
much. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, TriSonic. You can find all our episodes on the podcast platform of your choice or on our website at uk.themedialeader.com. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified of our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest news stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.